Enable submissions here, and then away you go. And of course, as always, this is all about soliciting discussion and giving you a reality check and all of that. Okay, as you may know, you can click on the graph to make it bigger. You'll need to do that to answer this question. And then we have a graph over on the side there, which is concrete to enliven any discussion that we may need to do with these. Okay, so the free trade equilibrium quantity. I guess this in a way tests how robotic you are. First thing in the morning, might be a high robotic coefficient there. And then by the answer, we will purge the roboticness, hopefully. All right, since we need to move on a little more than usual. All right, there we go. So let's pop the graph up there. There it is. Of course, you're probably looking at a large version on your device. So, what do I mean by that robotic thing? Some of you probably picked 92, right? Lines intersecting. Okay, well, no. I mean, we'll get back to that, you can see today, because today we're going to back away from the international trade thing and say, okay, covered that. We know what the world looks like now when we have a third party, namely somebody else supplying or demanding the good. But Chapter 9, that's the key issue. So we have that horizontal line there that says PW, P world, okay, $20. And so if you can buy all you want at $20, which is what that horizontal line says, people being rational, they're going to say, okay, I'm not going to pay more than $20. And at $20, the quantity demanded is 124. And the quantity supplied is 124. Okay, so it's the equilibrium. All right, does anybody want to, let me see if we have a lot of anybody's wanting to talk about this by checking the results. Okay, well, we still have 13 people, including 7 going with the robotic answer, right? What you're used to, but doesn't apply in this chapter 9. Okay, and then a couple of people picked smaller number. Again, I don't know why. Tell me. This is how I learn. This is how I get better at clarifying things, is anticipation, anticipating assumptions, what you meant, right? The most dangerous phrase in the English language, I thought you meant, right? And then get to, no, I didn't mean that, Okay, question, comment, thought, no, all right. Okay, just to maybe further hammer home the last point, totally purge that roboticness from your system. Yes. All right, let's zap that, because this is pretty much the same as the previous one, except now we're asking price rather than quantity. Again, the robotic answer that we're trying to get out of your system is answer C. Okay, and good, nobody, let's see, it is answer C, right? Let me double check. Didn't bring my glasses. Yes, the robotic answer is answer C, 34, and no one picked that. Good. Now, some people still picked something other than 20, but oh, yeah, the producers in the rest of the world are willing to provide it at $20. Okay, so that's the price that will clear the market, which means that there's enough available to meet all that's demanded at that price. Okay, so between the imports of 80, 124 minus 44, and the 44 supplied from the home country itself, the quantity supplied will be sufficient to meet the quantity demanded at a price of 20. Okay? Be Sam Donaldson if that didn't do it for you. Okay. Remember Sam Donaldson, persistent reporter? Google him sometime. He's no longer working, but he was regarded as obnoxious by many. But no, he was doing his job. Not that I always agreed with him. He's doing his job. He says, hey, I asked the question, answer it. You know, to the politicians and stuff. Don't be giving me this slick Willie treatment and bobbing and weaving. And Abraham Lincoln was the best at this. Somebody to ask him a question that he didn't want to answer, and he said, that reminds me of a story about, and he'd go off and tell some story that he'd like to tell instead of answering the question. Sam Donaldson didn't. No, thank you, Mr. President, very nice story, but back to my question. So, anyway, moving right along. See, now some of you, I don't know, maybe read too much into the 57%. That should have been a pretty quick answer after the previous one. Okay, so, you know, discussion on why you were looking around and why you didn't get that. Maybe you'd like to reveal why you answered differently.
Well, because it's 124, and I looked at the line.
Okay, so the 124, you got that on the previous one.
Yes, and then I put 39. Yeah, I went up there.
Okay, I see. Okay, so well, the answer you gave was for the home country to supply the whole 124, the price would have had to have been 39. But the price doesn't need to rise any higher than 20 to meet that demand at 124. Okay, cool. All right, I appreciate you giving me a little insight there on why you did what you did. All right, great. Let's move on to the next one. And there's a couple more left. Let's see, how many are we at here? Yeah, there's 3 more, including this one. Actually, this is just another one of those be careful questions. All right, got to do marginal analysis here and cut it off and move on. Now, some of you are probably, why isn't it 39? Well, the equilibrium price with no trade, which is what the 34 is as high as the price can go as a result of trade barriers. Okay, so the answer would have been 34 whether the tariff was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, a million, 25 million, 47 billion. Anything more than 14, the answer is the same. Anything 14 or higher, in this case, yields no trade. Any tariff 14 or higher is prohibitive. Let's see how we did and see if we can get some people to fess up so we can have a discussion of why you shouldn't have done what you did. Yeah, see, most people picked 39. Now, to help me and also to help yourself, think about what you wrote down or didn't understand or thought you got or whatever when I was jumping up and down saying, don't do this last time. Okay? Now, the top hat questions are cool because that way we got that out of your system. Okay? What I did, my little histrionics about, hey, there's nothing you can do with trade, nothing that'll get the price higher than the no trade price. For some reason, whenever you did take a note or something, and you know, at my end, and I didn't explain it clearly, maybe that's what it was. I didn't get that done, and you answered D on this one. The thing I told you not to do. Yeah, I'm not doing this, I know. Trying to get you to think about how you prepare, how you take notes, how you do things, and how sometimes that leads to mistakes. But I'm also trying to learn if I didn't explain it clearly. Q&A, anybody want to fess up on maybe the why you answered 1 or 32? No?
Sir,
Yes, appreciate it, yes.
if the horizontal line was super close to the marketplace,
Mhm.
like how would it still be like 34? Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, right up there it's 34, so yeah, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
This is as high as the price can go from anything you can do to trade.
And if the line is above the market price, is it 0?
Huh?
If the horizontal line is above the market
If this
price,
is, okay, well then, if this is above the no trade equilibrium, then this is an export good rather than an import good. See, if the world price is higher than the internal price, okay, then it's, oh, this makes sense to sell to foreigners. Okay, like Saudi Arabia, if they didn't have an opportunity to trade oil internationally, it would be cheaper than water. They have more oil than water in Saudi Arabia. Amazing thing, yeah. But the fact that it is a highly prized good internationally means they can sell it for, I didn't check what the latest price of oil is, $50, $60, $70 a barrel. Okay, and be rich. Although the Saudi princes don't share their wealth very widely among people, but at least the Saudi princes are rich. Appreciate your question once again. Any more? Anything else? Moving on. That's the purpose of these top hat things, and it's seemingly serving its purpose if a change in the numbers doesn't fool you again. Okay, nothing we can do about trade, tariffs, quotas, anything, will raise the price higher than 40 in this graph. I'm pointing to the one on the board, or it's not up there. Let's go back to it. 34 in this graph. Okay, so for example, in this lower graph, the one that I wrote in chalk, any tariff of 15 or higher yields the same price, 40. Of course, if the tariff is lower than 15, then just add it to the 25 to get the price. Okay, a non-prohibitive tariff changes the price by the amount of the tariff. All right, let's move on to the next one, a couple more. All right. Okay, so here we have a non-prohibitive tariff, $12. Paul, do you still need the number, or do you have it? You do need the number, okay. I'm trying to keep the question part on the screen, because I know there's some people in here who haven't spent the money on Top Hat or didn't bring their device today, so I want them to be able to see the question. 315-636-0905 is that phone number. All right. All right, so there you go. Now you know if you got it right or wrong. Let's check the reports first this time. Okay, the vast majority there, but still a lot of noise there, so let's go to the graph. And so you see the 32 there, that would be where you draw your new PW, okay, with the $12 tariff. And so at a price of 32, the quantity demanded within country H, and I should have put an H subscript on demand there, I forgot, but that's the demand within country H. Okay, the quantity demanded at a price of 32 is 101, and the quantity supplied from within country H is 77. So the amount imported is 24, 101 minus 77. Those 24 tons per year are subject to the $12 tariff. So 12 times 24, that's the 288. Okay, discussion on why you thought to do it differently and why you did it differently, that we can help everybody else. By the way, I appreciate your previous two questions. I guarantee you that there were at least 10 other people, for whatever reason, didn't pry their elbow loose from the table that benefited from your question or answer. Very, very important to have a few extroverts in the gang. 7 extroverts in the gang to help everybody else who's not. Another one of our extroverts.
Explain where you got that number again.
Oh, to get the tariff revenue, we have to figure out how much crosses the border subject to the tariff once we institute it. So the tariff raises the price by the $12 amount since it's non-prohibitive. Okay, so if you draw a line across the dotted line 32, you'll read the quantity demanded be 101. Okay, and the quantity supplied within country H being 77. The difference is the amount we must import in order not to have shortage, and we can, right? Because it's available for $20 internationally, and then the tariff has to be paid. So yes, we can import the 24, but then the people who do that importing have to pay the tariff on it. So 24 units times $12 a piece, and 24 times 12 is 288. Questions, comments? Doc, one more. Thank you very much. Yes.
It's not about this, but I was doing homework and there was a tariff increase, dead weight loss, and wasted revenue. The answer to what creates how much the dead weight loss was the areas of both wasted resources and dead weight loss.
Yes, that's another good point. Were you here last time? You might have missed it. See, there's a discrepancy between the way I view dead weight loss and the way the book does. So I put in chapter 9 in BB Learn, I put a clarifier there to address that. But also I spent about 5 minutes in class saying, hey, what the textbook calls wasted resources and dead weight loss together to me is dead weight loss. Okay, so that discrepancy in the book may have zapped you, I guess because you didn't pick up on the clarifier.
So if there's a question like on this, it'll be both?
Yeah, my version, yeah. So all the gain from trade that's lost from the tariff, what the book calls wasted resources plus DWL is DWL. Now I've communicated with the author on this, Tabrock, and he agrees with me. He says it's just a matter of terminology. And I like my terminology a little better than what they picked up on. So yeah, if you miss a class, get notes from somebody, but it is also there online where it says clarifier under chapter 9. Be sure to read all of those because, after all, that's why you have an instructor, is to clarify things, right? So if I read something in the book and I think, that could be a little more clear, that's when I write one of those little clarifiers and post it. So most of the chapters have those in there. Would behoove you to click on those and read those. Felix? Yeah.
Could you show us how to calculate the producer surplus gain as a result of prohibited trade barrier?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's do that here with this one. Okay, so a prohibitive trade barrier means getting the price from 25 to 40 in this case. All right, so the producer surplus at the 25 is this little triangle right here, right? Price minus opportunity cost, supply. Okay, Felix, you're good with that? Okay. Okay, so then the producer surplus becomes this big once we exclude foreigners and the price rises to 40. So the difference, the gain to producers, is this little upside down doorstop looking thing right here where my finger's pointing. Okay? That's what you,
Yeah.
okay.
Then could you show us consumer surplus would gain removing the trade restriction?
The consumer surplus gain with what?
Removing a restriction.
Oh, removing a restriction, okay. So suppose there's a prohibitive barrier, okay, then the consumer surplus is this much. Okay, just the standard original amount. Okay, if we eliminate the trade barrier, it goes down to the world price, and now the consumer surplus is this much. Okay, so this is the gain from removing that barrier. Okay, so putting your two questions together, we see this is the producer loss from removing the barrier, and this is the consumer gain from removing the barrier, so we have this here is a net gain. Or if we institute the prohibitive barrier, this is the net loss. And to readdress his question back there, in the textbook, this is called wasted resources right here. And this is called deadweight loss. Okay, and what I went over last time, and it says in that little clarifier, both of these together are deadweight loss. Both of these are net gains from getting rid of trade barriers or net losses from prohibitive barriers. Both of these are. So, deadweight loss. Yeah, like those homework questions, I had to edit them in order to eliminate that, what I view as a wrong terminology. Okay, more clarification? Okay, cool, good. Remember, homework questions are cheap. Okay, I know it still hurts to miss one, but trust me on this. You could miss a couple dozen questions all semester long and it wouldn't make any difference to your grade at all. Okay, of course, you don't do any of them, yeah, it'll cost you. Don't do any of the homeworks, yeah, that'll hurt. But, for example, I sent an email out yesterday, I believe it was for this class, where I said, here's where the highest score is on the homework so far, and that's pretty much a good guide to compare your score to it, to how you're doing on the homework part of the course grade. And the reason I mentioned that is because that high score, that whoever in here didn't show up today has the highest score, that's still way below the number of points possible. Okay, that's why I say you could miss a bunch of them and it wouldn't affect your grade a bit. Okay, I don't compare your score to the total possible. I compare your score to quite a bit less than that. Well, people miss classes and have hiccups and misunderstand things and all of that. I need to create an incentive to do the homework. It has to count, but I can do quite a bit to make it possible to miss a bunch and not hurt much at all. Okay, let's move on. We need to get into chapter 10 here eventually, and we'll do attendance here in just a couple minutes. Okay, so next, and that would be the last one, I do believe. Yep, that's the last one.
Did you show the previous question I had the graph on?
Oh, did I forget to attach the graph to this one? Doggone it, I did. Yeah, it's the same graph, but let me go back to that. So let's just show the answer and then I'll go back to it. So it's 336. So doggone it, forgot one of the graph uploads, did so many of them. Okay, so 336, how does that come out of this graph? Okay, with that $12 tariff, we do two bad things that create deadweight loss. One is we produce a bunch of good X for a cost that's higher than we could pay just to buy it from foreigners. Okay, so I didn't bring my little pointer here. from 44 up to 77, those additional units produced in the home country have an opportunity cost above the $20. So the area of that triangle is part of the deadweight loss, 33 times 12 divided by 2. Okay, write that down. Process that, which is, if you shorthand that one, it would be 6 times 33, which is 198. Okay, so that first triangle, the part of the deadweight loss that results from making it when we could be cheaper to buy it from foreigners is $198. I'll do it on the lower graph here in a minute, which I can point to. Okay, it'll be different numbers though. Okay, so 198 is one part of the deadweight loss, and then what about the other part? Well, the other part is we're distorting consumption by telling folks that it costs $32 when it only costs $20 to make it, okay, or to acquire it from foreigners. Okay, so from 101 to 124, that additional consumption was worth more to somebody out there. Right, from 101 to 124, those 23 units, it's 23 tons per year, were worth more to somebody out there. The demand line was above the $20 than it would have cost to buy it from foreigners. Okay, why didn't they buy it from foreigners? Because of the tariff made it more expensive to buy it. Okay, so if we do the math there, 101.24 minus 101 is 23 times 12 divided by 2. Same thing as 6 times 23, which is the same thing as 2 times 69, which is 138. See, there are shorthand ways to do math in your head, which is dangerous because it's easy to mess it up, but sometimes you have to. Okay, so 198 plus 138 is the 336. Okay, so you see in this international trade situation, the deadweight losses are sometimes in two pieces, right? From non-prohibitive trade barriers, the deadweight loss is in two pieces. Now, if it's prohibitive, right, then the two pieces merge into this one big triangle. But if the trade barrier is non-prohibitive, then there's a tariff revenue in between these two, okay, that separates them, right? This one, we did it ourselves for more money than it would cost to buy it. Okay? And then this one is, hey, there was a bunch more we could have enjoyed having that was worth more to us than it would have cost to buy it. Okay? 198 on the upper graph, 138 on the other piece of it, 336 total. Okay, questions, comments, thoughts? All right, let's go ahead and do the one on the board here since I separated the graph from the question. Okay, so we'll do that. And let's do attendance first, and then we'll turn this off. Or not turn it off, but move on to today's PowerPoint. Okay, and if you finish with that, find the deadweight loss for a $10 tariff on the graph on the board if you can see it from where you're sitting. Okay, going once, going twice on the attendance, gone. Tyler, you can move over here if you want for this question just to be able to see it better. We won't be upset if you march over here for a minute and then march back. You're welcome to. Anybody else too, if you want to move up for a minute to see it better, try to draw it as big as I can, but the graph's got a bunch of stuff in it, and so some of it gets kind of small. Don't hesitate to move where you can see something better. There's plenty of room in here. Okay, so suppose we have a $10 tariff. It's non-prohibitive. It'll increase the price by the $10, so it'll go up to 35. At 35, the quantity demanded by the home country consumers is 100. Okay, and that's 100 in case you can't see it way back there. Okay, and the quantity supplied from within country H is 75. Okay, so the amount imported is 100 minus 75, 25, times the tariff of 10. So we yields $250. Okay, 25 tons times $10 each, $250. And the deadweight loss is 35 times 10 divided by 2. Let's see, that's 175. I know you can't see that back there. 175 right here in this little part of the deadweight loss. And then the other part over here, okay, which is 35. Oops, I'm sorry, not 35, 25. Okay, times 10 divided by 2, 125. Okay, so the deadweight loss from a $10 tariff, always write it out so you don't have to figure out your hieroglyphics 3 weeks later when you're studying for the test. Okay, the other part of the deadweight loss is 125. Again, what are the two parts? The so-called wasted resources part of the deadweight loss, which is, hey, it would have been cheaper to buy this from the foreigners rather than make it ourselves. Loss as a result, $175 per year, per time frame, okay? Tons per year. Okay, and then over here, hey, we could have enjoyed it, consuming more of this stuff if the price had been the world price of 25, we would have consumed 125, but by artificially increasing the price, we only consumed 100. For those another 25 units, it would have been worth more than $25 to us to have it. The resulting loss in satisfaction is $125 a year. So these two pieces are the total deadweight loss, $300 a year.
Where is the 25 coming from?
The 25 here.
125.
Yeah, the 125. 25 times 10 is 250, and then divided by 2.
Oh, it's a triangle.
Yeah, it's this. Yeah, sorry, there's a bunch going on here, right there.
And
Yeah.
then the
And then the other one over here is this triangle.
75.
Yeah, and it's 35 times 10 divided by 2, which is 175. Yes.
I know where you're getting the numbers from, and then I know the left triangle is, if with trade, we were to save the 175. Can you explain the 125 again? Like, what does it mean?
Yeah. By having the tariff, our consumption goes down to 100, and we can see from the fact that it used to be 125 that these last 25 units are worth more to some consumer out there than it actually costs to buy the good. Okay, so the lost consumption value, the distorted consumption, the fact that the consumers are going to buy a different mix of goods and services than they otherwise would have purchased had the price been the actual cost of buying the good, yields this deadweight loss. It's kind of like if you go to the grocery store and you love peaches, and the peaches are artificially expensive because of a tax on them, you don't buy any peaches, and so you missed out on your peach, not because the peaches were actually scarce, but because the price was artificially high and you bought something else that you didn't like as much as peaches.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I love to see those furrowed brows. Oh, okay, and see that is so cool. It means some lights went on there. Yeah. The furrowed brows means you're really thinking hard. Somewhere I've got a little cartoon clip from the Wall Street Journal that a little girl comes home and tells her mother, "Boy, we were working hard at school and I was thinking hard and it hurt." That gray matter, when it creases, sometimes, ouch. Yeah. Okay, moving on to today's PowerPoint then. Oops, went a little too far. You can see we've got 10 top hat questions on that too eventually. I don't think we're going to get to any of those today, but that's all right.
Sir, and what would be the revenue?
The revenue, 250. Yeah, the revenue is the amount imported with the tariff, 100 minus 75 times the $10 each. I think at the risk of putting another invisible number in there, drop bigger this time, there. See, that's why the tariff and why the deadweight losses are in two pieces, because in between them has that tariff revenue. Which means if it's not a tariff, if it's some other way of reducing trade, that means we add that to the deadweight loss. That's why a tariff is the least bad of the ways to limit trade. Because at least you pick up some of the loss that gains from trade and additional revenue to the government to pay for cops and firemen and soldiers and all the things that the government has to pay for. Okay, so like if it's prohibitive, well, there's no tariff revenue, and then the deadweight losses squeeze together and they're one big triangle. All right, good. I think. All right, so we'll go into today's. And now why not go all the way to slideshow mode? All right. Now I've set that up a little bit by coming in early today and filling up the Blackboard. And by the way, if you're in here as early as externalities, oh, I misspelled externalities there. And you write down the stuff on the board. I love the fact that you're dedicated and here early and all that, but be careful because, as you can see, I didn't get to this for 35 minutes. Okay, and then, you put arrows and this goes here in the lecture, and you can just as well wait till I get to it and be fine. And if I talk through it so fast you can't write it all down, say, whoa, hold on, whoa, Nellie, or Doc or something, and I'll give you time to write it down. So anyway, it's just the first thing is just a warning. I've been doing this a long time, and these words are interchangeable in my brain, and so I may use one of them instead of the other one. And so this is not an underline. This means is the same as. It's kind of like a supersized equal sign. Okay, so if I use the word spillovers instead of externalities, I'm saying the same thing. Okay, so starting out, we go to our initial graph, and we add a few things to it just to clarify where we're going. See, so far we've assumed competitive markets, and by the way, that's chapter 13. That's why we need to get to that, is no microeconomics course is complete without saying, well, but Doc, what if it's not competitive? See, and that's what that chapter is about. This chapter is about, but Doc, what if there are spillover costs? Whoops, there, I did it again. What if there are external costs or benefits associated with either buying or selling, consuming or producing something? Okay, well, so far we've assumed there are not. Okay, we've assumed that the marginal private cost, okay, notice the little p, see we've had MC and MB. This chapter, we've got to put a P or an S in between them to differentiate, okay, in case they are different, between marginal private costs and marginal social costs. So far, we've assumed there's no difference. Okay, so we didn't need a P or an S in between the MC and the MB. We've been assuming there are no externalities, there are no spillovers. Okay, and if there aren't any spillovers and it's competitive, okay, which we'll challenge that assumption later on, then the equilibrium is the same as the optimum. Okay, then all that good stuff that we've been saying about markets, what it says up here in the slide, happen. Things are all hunky-dory. We maximize the gains from trade. Only the highest value desires are met, only by the lowest cost producers, and we get all kinds of producer surplus and consumer surplus and all of that. That all depends on the equilibrium being the optimum, which means it's competitive and there are no spillovers. Chapter 10 is about what if there are spillovers? What does that do? Well, that means that the price system, that powerful engine providing information and incentives, is a little bit off. It's going to be a little wacky. Okay, it's going to produce some results that aren't exactly as wonderful as they could be. Now, this is one of the reasons that markets are not perfect, because there are a lot of spillovers, and many of them are not policy relevant. Let me give you an example of one that I think is probably not policy relevant. Suppose you get in the elevator. Let's pretend it's not here at UTSA where it's, the buildings are only four stories tall. We're talking World Trade Center or something. Okay, the new one, 100 stories or whatever it is. Long, big building. And you get in the elevator at the ground floor and you're going up, 100 stories, and all of a sudden, there's other people in the elevator with you, and it stinks in here. What's going on? Somebody else got in the elevator and they'd had, a bunch of bean and cheese tacos for breakfast. And their stomachs didn't handle that so well, and that their reaction to it coincided with that moment that you were stuck in an elevator with them. You know, back when I was younger, and you probably weren't alive yet, there was also a commercial like that. It said, I use Dial, don't you wish everybody else did? You know, a Dial soap. Same thing. It's like, and it's an externality, right? Now, if you've read your textbook, you know what some of the remedies for externalities are. Change the laws to make it clear what the property rights are so there can be negotiations, okay? Or a Pigovian tax, which means putting a tax on the thing that's responsible for the external, like in this case it would be the beans, okay? Or tradable allowances where we cap the level of something and then we allow people to have that permission to do it, to be traded back and forth. Is that going to happen in the bean case? In other words, is that bad enough that you're stuck in an elevator with somebody that had a bean and cheese tacos for breakfast and didn't? Is that bad enough so that we need another EPA or another policy, somebody to tax beans? No, it may not be very nice, and you may, you may stagger out of the elevator, doing this when you finally get to your floor. Maybe you'll even push the button and get off earlier and wait for another elevator. But, we're not talking serious morbidity or mortality or even any lasting damage other than discomfort. Okay, so the world is full of externalities, and only some of them are worth actually turning the government loose on them or making changes in laws so that they can be negotiated away by way of the Coase theorem, which, if you've read your book a little bit or skimmed it, you've seen the mention of that. Okay, so the equilibrium is typically not exactly equal to the optimum because there are lots and lots of relevant spillovers, but close enough for most things. In fact, that nasty phrase about close enough for government work actually is literally correct and not something to go, about in this case, because there are many cases where the externalities, like the example that I just gave, just aren't big enough to be worth the cost of the political machinery being turned loose to create some sort of a policy intervention on that basis. Okay, so chapter 10 is about the exceptions. Here's what the world looks like in the relatively few cases where the marginal social cost is bigger than the marginal private cost. They aren't always different by a uniform amount that doesn't vary with quantity, but that's the case we're going to look at because this is principles and it's just, for example, let's suppose, see in some cases, MPC looks like this, and then MSC does this. Okay, up to a certain point, they're the same, and then they, like for example, pumping from our aquifer. That's the way that looks. Up to where the two lines separate, the amount of water pumped doesn't have any external costs. But if you go beyond that, the aquifer starts being drawn down. You're pumping it faster than Mother Nature's putting more water in there. And so the marginal social cost is now, hey, you're making it more expensive to pump water from this place next year by pumping so much this year. Okay, but anyway, so that story aside, beware of this in the real world. There's lots of this. This is what we're going to look at. We're going to assume that the lines are parallel, which means that the external cost is the same whether the quantity is small or large. Okay, assumptions are dangerous things, as you probably know. So always beware of the assumptions, especially in dealing with economics. It's so complicated, there always have to be assumptions. Okay? And don't forget what they are. Again, going back to this, we didn't state this until now. It was a hidden assumption. Okay? No externalities, no spillovers, competitive markets. Now we're saying, okay, 9 chapters later, okay, let's look at one of the assumptions we haven't really gotten into so far, not even really stated. I probably stated it back in chapter 1, but not much since then. Okay, so what does that say? That says usually these things. Okay, but there it is written out. Okay, usually all the costs are incumbent upon those making the choices. All the consumption benefits usually go to the people making the purchase, and all the production costs usually go to the people making the sales, but not always. See, that bean example was somebody paid a couple bucks for some breakfast tacos, and that wasn't the full social cost of those tacos. Some of the cost went to the people in the elevator going up to the 100th floor with them. Okay, or let's say you're pedaling down the road on your bicycle if you have one. Suddenly you get behind a car whose exhaust is especially bad. See, they're an external cost, right? They paid a certain sum to drive their car from point A to point B. That wasn't the full social cost of that trip. Some of it was deposited in your lungs, right, and your discomfort, and if it happens enough, your diminished health as a result of that happening too often. Okay, so nothing much going on in this graph other than here it is. In fact, the graph doesn't really have enough detail. Here's our consumer surplus, just to kind of, okay, making those assumptions. Here's the producer surplus, okay, making those assumptions. Okay, QE, equilibrium, equals Q star, the optimum, right, under these circumstances. Okay, so again, hopefully my stories covered some of this ground, but here it is written in red and black and white. Okay, just so, in case I said it too fast or you didn't grasp it or whatever, there it is written down for you. Okay, externalities and spillovers are the same thing. Fishing for questions. Okay, now there's just a little bit of clarification in the social cost. Does the social cost mean the cost to everybody? Yes. You're part of everybody, right? So it's possible, if nobody but you is affected by your decision, that the marginal benefit or the marginal cost to society is entirely just the marginal benefit to you or the marginal cost to you. And again, that's what this hieroglyphics right here means. Okay? The cost to everybody could be just the cost to you because maybe nobody else other than you is affected. Typically, that's the case for most production and consumption decisions. Likewise, the social benefit. This time of year, a social benefit is about to pop up that we all enjoy, but there'd be a lot more of it if it, well, and by the way, this is probably another example of one that's not policy relevant. This is the time of year when people sometimes get in their car and drive around neighborhoods to enjoy the Christmas lights, right? Now, did you help any of those people pay for those Christmas light displays? Okay? Even though there's a huge spillover cost, and of course that's part of it, is some of that's internalized because you derive joy in getting all these people to go drive by your house and admire your house. But I suspect that if we internalize that, and by the way, I'm using the jargon deliberately, so you'll say, Doc, what on earth did you just say, if you didn't understand it? If we internalize that cost, okay, that external benefit, internalize that benefit, sorry, I'm so used to talking about cost because that's more common. What would that mean? That would be, we would subsidize the installation of Christmas lights, right? We would have a public subsidy for it because it benefits the public, right? And if we did that, some people at the margin that say, should I put in Christmas lights or not? Well, that's awfully expensive and it takes a lot of time and I've got to dangle from a tree and I'm risking my life and, well, it sure is nice and pretty. No. Never mind. They're right on the margin. That's what that means. Oh, there's a subsidy. Oh, I get $10 or whatever the amount is if I put in. Okay. See, so some people say, nah, still not worth it. But some will say, oh, okay, for that? Sure, okay, yeah. So at the margin, the subsidy yields more Christmas lights to enjoy. You see? So an externality is one where third parties are benefited or impacted negatively without consultation, without compensation, either for the better or for the worse in some cases. Same thing if you do your gardening in your front yard, you make your house look nice. That does two bad things for your house, actually. It does one bad thing is you have to do the labor and pay for the plants. It'll raise your property taxes too, probably, because your house will have higher property value. And your neighbors will enjoy it, right? See, there's that other external benefit other than you'll have to pay more for property tax. That benefits your neighbors too, right? But then they just enjoy walking by your house or driving by your house because you did a good job landscaping. And again, there'd be more of that if there was a subsidy for it. But can you imagine having to assess how much somebody's landscaping or Christmas lights are worth and having some government, and I don't think we would want to do that. I think the cost of that would not be worth the benefits of increased Christmas lights or increased gardening in the front yard of somebody's house. So probably another example of something not policy relevant. But how about the case where there's a contagious disease going around? And we want people to get their shots so that they don't, A, they don't get it, and B, they don't get it and then spread it to somebody else. See, there's the external benefit, right? The private benefit is if I get this shot, I won't get it. The external benefit is if I get this shot, other people won't get it for me if I get it. Okay? So the typical person will not value greatly, if at all, the external benefit. They'll just compare the benefit to them to the cost and time and money of getting the shot. Okay, the inoculation, and well, so at the margin, again, there'll be some people who are just, oh, the shots are free, oh, subsidy, right? Oh, okay. See, and then more people will get it, and the disease, see, that's probably policy relevant in many cases, because it might be a really nasty disease. It might be worth the machinery of the legislature and all of that, deciding how much to subsidize and making the money available. Okay, so some are policy relevant, some are not. Okay, so here we've got the graph that I drew already. Okay, see the double-headed arrow indicates the degree of the spillover to others. Okay, the external to you, to the decision maker effects on others. Okay, so the MPB might be, hey, I won't get the disease as a result of this. The MSB means a bunch of other people won't get the disease from the people being inoculating themselves against it. Okay, so again, there it is written in black, white, and red up there. Pretty much what I think I just said. But it is up to you to judge whether I did say that, one, or whether you think that I did, or I think you said that, but it's not clear. Once, twice. Again, I keep making this pitch about going over the old things, the old mistakes that you made and learning from them. If you did that and you recognize that there are a lot of things that you let go by in class or otherwise that you should have not let go by without a challenge or, hey, we'll Doc, go over that again, that's the kind of thing that you learn or could learn and then do. It's like, yeah, that's right. I remember I missed number 27 on the test. And I remember him explaining that in class and I didn't get it. I didn't say anything. Okay, hello, hint, next time that happens, do intervene, do ask. Okay, so equilibrium not equal to the optimum. Okay, let's go ahead and sketch that out. What's the equilibrium? People naturally, freedom, equilibrium, people naturally, when free to make choices, equate by buying more or buying less the benefits to them with the costs to them. They keep going, doing more of something until the next one has more opportunity cost than benefit and say that's it. The sum total of all of that in the marketplace is, okay, that's an E, not a C. Okay, might be hard to see way back there. Okay, equilibrium quantity is where the marginal private cost equals the marginal private benefit. In this rare case where this isn't true here, okay, where there is a difference, a spillover benefit or cost, in this case a cost, the optimum, that's a Q with an asterisk on it, which means Q star best. The optimum is less than the equilibrium amount. At the equilibrium, there's a deadweight loss. Okay, past the Q star amount, the additional cost to all of society is more than the additional benefit to society. Okay, so those last increments, I'll put some numbers up here in a minute when it gets to the graph on the slides. We're just kind of going over it in general there without the numbers for now. Okay, a deadweight loss results from the equilibrium. You see the deadweight loss is kind of a measure of whether it might be policy relevant. Okay, so let's just say for the moment that deadweight loss is $1 million a year. Okay, so then we ask ourselves, for substantially less than $1 million a year, can we fix this? If we think it'll cost $10 million a year to fix a $1 million a year problem, we say, not policy relevant. Let it be. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, it's a shame we can't be at the optimum, but to correct it, to do something about it, costs even more than fixing it. Right? We experience a lot of that in lives, right? You say if it's not broken, don't fix it. What if it's broken a little bit? Well, should I fix it? Well, okay, well, it costs this much time and money, and leave it the way, leave it a dripping faucet and let it drip. Okay, water's pouring in there, flood. No, don't fix. Okay, kind of a marginal analysis thing. All right. Okay, so we want people to continue to be free, right? We don't take that away from them in most cases. There are some cases where the spillovers are so bad that, we might have to restrict freedom. But in most cases, we want people to make comparisons for themselves about how much or how little of something to do. So what we do to fix this is to nudge them in the right direction by making the good a little more costly through a tax, for example. Okay, we still allow them to buy as much or as little as they want to, but we say, hey, we need to internalize this externality. A tax equal to this difference makes the MPC and the MSC the same thing. That'll come up on a slide a little bit later on, so I'll do more of that when we get to it, but that's what we mean by that bottom phrase there. When externalities are present, if they're policy relevant, we can look at how to internalize them. Okay, in other words, to make them part of your thought process about whether you want to buy a little bit more or a little bit less of something. Okay, a tax on the good equal to the external cost puts that into your brain as part of the cost. And then if you still do it, if you still do what the item is, what are you doing? You're providing compensation to the victims. Yeah, in effect. It may be very indirect. It may not mean much to you if you're in the elevator and it stinks, at the bean tax or something maybe. But all of society is being compensated indirectly in advance for just in case they're stuck in an elevator with somebody that had too many beans for breakfast and it affected them. And how are they indirectly compensated? Well, they don't have to pay as much in taxes in other ways to finance government. The people eating the beans that might stink up the elevators are paying a little more in taxes as a result. So very indirect compensation and some damage mitigation because there won't be quite as many bean burrito, bean and cheese tacos sold if the price of beans is higher. Okay, so that's what we mean by internalizing them, is to charge those responsible, and then everybody else gets that directly or indirectly as compensation. Question, comment, thought. By the way, question, comment, thought could be, hey doc, hold on, go back. Okay, just because the button hit the slide doesn't mean I can't send it back. Okay, I'm always, asking, not telling. Okay, so people will typically base their decisions on private costs only. So we use that tax to make that one of the private costs. See, that's what we mean by internalizing the externality or spillover. All right, but until we do that, the opportunity costs are underestimated and the market quantity is greater than the socially efficient level. Again, hieroglyphics, jargon, what does that mean? Draw the graph. The market equilibrium is here. The optimum is here. The market equilibrium quantity is bigger than than the efficient level, Q star, the socially efficient level. Okay, at the higher market level, the additional costs exceed the additional benefits. And a deadweight loss emerges. Okay, so the shaded area there, let me go ahead and deadweight loss from freedom. Freedom to act on incomplete information. See, that's the basis of the deadweight loss. Freedom to act on incomplete information. The free market price, until there's something done for internalizing, the free market price doesn't reflect all the costs of producing the good. Okay, so freedom to act on incomplete information means equilibrium will be, in this case, too large. Questions, comments, thoughts? All right, so, oops, put that other line in there. All right, well, there we have the graph that I have up there. And again, the social cost includes the private cost. Most of the time, the social cost is just the private cost. But in this case, it's a little bit more by the external cost. Okay, there it is. Question, comments. Pretend I'm left-handed, fish for questions. Okay, seems a little bizarre to say reducing the quantity that people buy, yeah? If the information that people have becomes complete, in other words, if all of the costs were to be imposed on those producing and then those buying, the quantity would be smaller. This is the right quantity. Okay, Q star, a smaller quantity. Okay, so again, should be reduced. Okay, and the way it says it there is, okay, we're going to force it down. No, it's not going to be forced down. We're going to nudge people in the right direction by, for example, imposing that Pagovian tax. Okay, and thus it will go down on its own, right, just from the higher cost of purchasing. Okay, the output should be reduced. If I thought when I was going over this before class, I would have done a little edit that output will fall to the socially efficient level. In fact, if you have the PowerPoint slide, and then you might just edit that a little bit, instead of output should be reduced, output should fall to the socially efficient level. Okay, how do we do that? Again, one way is through that Pagovian tax. And one of the things that I did think to do, because this is in addition, that last sentence there, why are we going to do that? Why are we going to nudge them in direction, and especially why are we going to do it with tax? Because that reduces damages, right? Less, going with the bean story, fewer elevators will be stunk up if this many beans are going to be consumed rather than this many, right? Okay, so that's what it means there. It says that reduces damages. Okay, by having less produced, there are less of the external effects out there, whatever those were. In this case of the beans, the fumes that result sometimes as a byproduct. And money is collected to either directly or indirectly finance compensation. See, in some cases, it's direct. Maybe you want to collect money from somebody with pumping gases into the atmosphere out of a power plant or something, or out of a factory. Maybe then you want to compensate the people that live immediately downwind of the factory. Direct compensation. Okay? Or maybe they live near the airport, down one of the ends of the runway, and the airport was built after their home was there. That's a key thing there, because if you move there, the airport's already there. You take that into account, and you pay less for the house, and you say, yeah, the house is cheaper because of the noise, and now, okay. But if the airport goes in after the homes are there, now you're being damaged by the fact that airplanes are taking off over your house. And so maybe there's a tax that the people pay with their tickets that in part compensates people for the noise and property value loss for the airport having been built there. Okay? Sometimes the compensation that's financed is direct, like that. Sometimes it's indirect in that somebody's paying more in taxes than other people do, bearing a bigger cost of society's governmental expenses. Okay? Just kind of repeating the same message over and over again here. People typically make decisions based on the costs directly impacting them. They may not even be aware of any of the spillover effects. Okay, so they only on the private, that's what produces the equilibrium. And in this case, we're talking about benefits, so they underestimate the benefits of something. They don't take into account that other people will not get a disease that they will not be spreading because they've inoculated themselves against it. So MPC is equal to MPB equals the equilibrium. I'm going to draw my E a little bigger in this case so you can see it in the back there. That's the equilibrium quantity where MPB is equal to MPC. The optimum is over here. More people would get the inoculation. More people would install Christmas lights. More people would garden in their front yard as opposed to their backyard or somewhere else in their house, side yard. If there was a subsidy paid on the basis of the external benefits that result from doing those things. Okay, where's the deadweight loss? Well, let's see. When we stop here, the marginal social benefit is way up there, and the marginal social cost is only down there. So we stopped too soon, and by stopping at QE, we leave this sitting on the table. Okay, and it's a loss in the sense that it's something that we would normally gain. Okay, we leave it sitting on the table. Whereas, see, this loss here is we actually lost something we had. Right, rather than the one on the graph on the right with the external benefits. There we lose by failing to acquire something that is available. Okay, money lying on the sidewalk and we say, nah, walk past it. Okay, so there's the graph. Has a little more information on it than mine, but basically the same thing. All right, let's go ahead and put a few numbers on here just to nail that down in ways that I typically ask it. Right, have that math in your notes. Okay, so let's see. This is good enough. Go. All right. So we're going to use that graph to talk not only about the dimensions of the problem, but the dimensions of doing something about it. Okay, so one possibility are the private solutions. Now let's go ahead and just kind of go through the numbers first. Okay, so we see here from the graph that the marginal external cost is $6 per ton. Being lazy, got to put my units up here. Tons per year down there. Of course you see the $6 per ton, right? Guarantee some don't. Come on, get used to challenging when you don't get it. 10 minus 4 nails it down here, right? Because the lines are parallel, but hey, it's, so I didn't have that there. No, we don't need that, still $6. How do we know? Well, because 16 minus 10, still $6, right? The lines are parallel. Okay, so the marginal external cost is $6. Okay, so the deadweight loss is 90. Of course, you see that, right? Yes. Okay, so at the equilibrium quantity, the marginal social cost is 19. How do I know it's 19? I'll go ahead and put it up here. But how did I know it was 19 even before I put it up there? Because this is 13, and I know the lines are 6 apart. Okay, so 6 times 30 divided by 2 is like 3 times 30, which is 90. Okay, so the deadweight loss is $90 per year. Okay, the equilibrium is 90, the optimum is 60, and the deadweight loss from not doing anything about that is 90, not that 90 that's up there. Okay, sorry, there's two 90s, one the quantity. 90 is the area of this triangle. 6, okay, the external cost, times the difference between where you are and where you should be, and then because it's a triangle, divide by 2. Okay, $90 per time period. If we levy the Pigovian tax, which is one of the government solutions, okay, which we'll get to on a slide in a minute, we do that. I've talked about it a couple times already. If we levy the Pigovian tax, that will yield $360 per year. You see that, of course. You know, I'm being a little snide and sarcastic because I know some of you don't see it. Okay. Levying the $6 tax per ton of this product, X Okay, we'll shift the supply line by $6, as we've shown in previous chapters. So now the MPC and the MSC line will be one and the same. They'll merge. There will be one upward sloping line on here, and the equilibrium will shift to 60. And so that's how much we'll sell with that tax in place. $6 per unit times the 60 units sold with the tax in place, $360. Okay, that's the amount of money that's available to finance either damage mitigation or compensation of those harmed, either directly or indirectly. Now, there are some cases where it isn't necessary to have the government intervene directly. It being the government, might need to do only one thing in order for the private sector to resolve it, and that is to make it clear who has the rights, clearly define the property rights. So, for example, let's say that your neighbor is playing their music really loud late at night. And then you call up the city and they say, no, the law clearly states that it must be quiet from 10 to 6. I don't know whether it does or not. But suppose you, okay, so you tell your neighbor, says, look, hey, I have the right, according to the law, for it to be quiet here from 10 to 6. However, I kind of like your music and it's not that bad. I'm willing to talk, Yeah, I wouldn't mind if you played your music a little later than 10 occasionally, as long as you don't change the kind of music it is. Play it a little bit later, but a little bit of compensation, for the late music, I'm willing to talk. I'm not that dead set against, 10 o'clock going from noisy to quiet, a little transition. So your neighbor says, well, I sure do love my late night music past 10 o'clock. I don't want to have to quit then. I don't want the cops to come over. So maybe I better talk to my neighbor, say, and resolve this. And so then you have an agreement on how much later they can play, which songs they can't play late, in case you don't like some kinds of music they're playing, right? Because it's your property right, right? Because you made the call to the city. So you negotiate, and so they play their music a little later, and they make payment to you for that, for you tolerating the music past when you have to, according to the law. What happens if you call the city and the city says, hey, there's nothing in the books about this. Your neighbor can play their music as late as they want, as loud as they want, anytime they want. You go, whoa, wow. See, I could move, but the next neighbor, they could be noisy too. Why don't I go talk to my neighbor? We'll see what we can resolve. Okay, so you go over there and you say, look, the law says you have perfect right to do what you're doing, and I appreciate that, but hey, got some money here. Wave a little money in front of him, says, look, I'll pay you whatever amount if you turn the music down a little bit and cut it off at 11:30. And they say, I love my music, but I could use the cash. Deal. Okay? You see, that's what this is about. The Coase theorem. Okay? According to Coase, Ronald Coase won Nobel Prize in economics some years ago for his Coase theorem. If certain conditions are met, namely it's not that big of a hassle to consummate these deals, and also no significant entry, exit, or income effects, I'll explain that in a minute, then this can work efficiently, in fact. In fact, if certain conditions are met, the actual effect, what's done, how much the music is reduced, how much sooner it turns off, the effect is the same regardless of whether you have the right to quiet after 10 o'clock or whether your neighbor can blare out the music as long as they want to. Okay, now, last thing today here before we move on, I see time's up in a minute. What do I mean by that income effect, entry effect? Okay, go back to the music example. Suppose somebody learns that you're paying off your neighbor to be quiet. They crank up their music. I'm going to have my music loud unless you pay me too. See, there's an entry effect. Got a problem there. Okay? So as long as there isn't any of that or income effect to where more or less is desired because now I'm getting all this money, the Coase theorem can work pretty well. All right, well, we're out of time, so we'll finish up chapter 10 next time, including some top hat questions, and see you Thursday.